Welcome, I'm Anna Galetli, and we're going to continue on with the connective tissues in part 2 of Unit 2. And I'm going to be focusing on the dense connective tissue propers and then cartilage bone and the membranes in this slideshow. So here we're going to be looking at dense regular connective tissue proper. Sometimes this gets lumped in with something called fibrous connective tissue. And sometimes also dense irregular gets thrown in there as well. Okay, so again, like with this, the other tissues, I want you to be able to ID a picture. I want you to give the function of the tissue and also its structures. Okay, and then I want you to give an example of where you would find it in the body. So an example of the location. Okay, so with all of the dense connective tissues, what you have are lots and lots of fibers, all right, and then tiny little bits of ground substance. So that's where this clear stuff is right here, all right. Now with dense regular, what you're seeing is collagen fibers, all right, so collagen fibers, and they are going in the same direction, all right, so one direction, okay. And what this does is if I've got a fiber that's going this way, and then I've got something that pulls on it that way and that way, it's resisting tension in one direction, all right? So the purpose of dense regular connective tissue proper is related to the collagen fibers going in one direction. It resists tension in one direction. So resists tension in one direction. Okay, here I've got the locations and where you find it. Now I've already mentioned the ground substance, the fibers, and then these purple splotches here are the nuclei that are going to be scattered throughout. There will be other cells present, like a lot of fibroblasts. I'm not going to ask you to differentiate a fibroblast from, which is probably what most of these things are actually, the nuclei of fibroblasts. I'm not going to ask you in a slide like this to differentiate that from white blood cells. All right, next slide. All right, now we're looking at dense irregular connective tissue. Same basic function, except we're going to focus on the irregular part. So regular went in one direction. Irregular goes all kinds of directions, all right? So multi-directional. All right. So in the slide on the left, I can see blank spaces, which is where my ground substance is. Now, if they put a black stain on here, we would actually see in reality that there are a lot of elastic fibers in here. I know this because I know what kind of tissue it is. Don't worry about that, but technically, I mean, you might think that this is a lot of white space, but it's not, because there's actually a lot of elastic fibers in there that didn't pick up the pink stain because elastic fibers don't absorb that stain, okay? And then I've got these collagen fibers that are going in all kinds of different directions, okay? So this means it can resist tension in all kinds of directions. This is really good in places like the skin where you're pulling in lots of different ways. So this slide over here on the left, that's high powered so you can see it. Most of the time you're going to be looking at it more in low power, and this is skin, okay? And so again, these things in here, these are the collagen fibers, and the blank spaces, that's where you've got, let me pick a different color. These blank spaces in here, that's where you've got ground substance, but also elastic fibers that are not absorbing that pink stain, all right? So again, most important point, irregularly arranged fibers going in many directions, resists force in multiple directions. Where do you find it? Best example, dermis of your skin, different joint capsules, submucosas of organs that move around a lot. All right, next slide. All right, let's start looking at cartilage. All right, generic function. All right, it can resist tension and compression. All right, now what makes it different from CTP, connective tissue proper, is the extracellular matrix is more like jello, all right? This means it can withstand compression better, because think about it, if you step in a puddle of water, your foot goes all the way down to the bottom. But if you step on a tray of Jell-O, you've got kind of like a squishy cushion, right? So that's the idea. It provides better cushion, okay? But you still have a lot of fibers, which keeps you from pulling the Jell-O apart. So imagine Jell-O with a lot of stringy carrots in it, okay? Now we're gonna add a new type of cell. It's called a chondrocyte. So if this is my chondrocyte, and that's its nucleus right here, it's gonna live in a little cave that we call a lacuna, okay? That looks kind of like an egg or an eyeball. Anyway, so that's what it's gonna do. And then it's gonna be surrounded by ground substance, which is a Jell-O-like consistency. These tissues are avascular and they don't have nerves. So when you tear cartilage and it hurts, it's not the cartilage that hurts, it's the tissues around it that do have nerves that are hurting. And again, no blood vessels, which means cartilage takes a long time to heal without those blood vessels. Does not regenerate well. Has all the same types of fibers, lots of water, and this is really important, is the 3 types. And I need you, when you give me function, how is each functionally different? All right? The only definition of function that's like this that you can use is with hyaline. These 2 are special. And I want you to tell me how functionally they are special when I ask you what their function is. All right, next slide. All right, so hyaline cartilage. When I think hyaline cartilage, when you look at this stuff, you need to come up with things that help you remember what they look like. I think fish eyes, okay? What I see are a bunch of eye sockets with eyeballs with the little pupil in there, okay? So that is the lacuna, that is the chondrocyte, and that is the nucleus. And you can see that it's all over the place, okay? Now all of this pink staining stuff, this is your ground substance, okay? So that's all of this, so that's this stuff. And what happens is that this stains smooth, so it has a smooth stain. There is a ton of collagen fiber, lots of collagen in here, but because of the way the staining is, you can't see the individual fibers, so you just have to believe that they're there. With hyaline cartilage, I think the ground substance looks smooth, glossy. Sometimes people call it glassy. All right, it's shiny. Very firm and pliable. Places where you find it right here, and again, resists tension and compression. All right. Now the picture up here, we're showing it with a pink stain. Often you see it with a blue stain, and this is it right here. Okay, so there's the ground substance. Here's the lacuna with the chondrocyte in it. This is low magnification, so it's a little harder to see. Next slide. All right, elastic cartilage. So what do I want you to focus on? Great recoil. All right, so this has elastic fibers, so it recoils after stretch. Also resists tension and compression. But the number one thing you need to put on a test, recoils. That's the most important point, is it recoils back into shape, and that is because of the elastic fibers. All right, we only have 2 examples in the human body, the ear and the epiglottis. Okay, now if we're looking at this, we want to look for our fish eyes. So there's the fish eye. In this case I can see 2 little nuclei. Here's another one. There's the lacuna, there's the chondrocyte, and there's the nucleus. Now this is not the best picture in the world. There are others that are nicer, but look at all of these lines right here. Let's pick a different color. So right here, 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 okay? Those are your elastic fibers, and they are all throughout the ground substance. Now, if you remember with the hyaline, you couldn't really see the collagen fibers because of the staining. With elastic, with the elastic cartilage, because there's so much elastic fiber, even with the staining, you can see it embedded in the ground substance, okay? So that is visually why it looks different from hyaline cartilage. Next slide. All right, fibrocartilage. Again, I have a lacuna, I have a chondrocyte, and here's the nucleus. Lacuna, chondrocyte, there's the nucleus, okay? Fibrocartilage has so much collagen fiber. It's like more collagen fiber than ground substance. It would be like if I took a cotton ball and stretched it out and then soaked it in Jello, okay? Tons and tons of fibrocartilage. So what does collagen do? It resists tension. Well, so does hyaline. Hyaline has collagen. So how is this different? Extreme tension. All right? I could, with my hands, pull apart hyaline cartilage. All right, if I tried hard enough. Fibrocartilage, I cannot pull it apart. It is that strong, and it is because of all the collagen. There is so much collagen, you can actually see it in the ground substance. So this is the key component. Extreme tension. Resists extreme tension. Best examples of where to find it: intervertebral discs, pubic symphysis. All right, next slide. All right, looking at that third category of connective tissue, we have bone. All right, this is also called osseous tissue. We're going to talk more about this later, but what you have basically are osteocytes, which are your bone cells. That's all of these dark little lines. The lacunas around it, because of the staining, you can't really differentiate them, but those are there. All right, this is where, change color. These things right here, this is where you've laid down mineral. So the ground substance, all right, is actually minerals, in this case, calcium, phosphorus, and magnesium, okay? And that's basically bone. If you look at this structure from here to here, this might come up in your APR. That's the osteon, so this is the structural unit of bone. In compact bone, you don't actually see this in spongy bone. And then the osteocyte is right there. That's the actual cell. So this is a cell. This is the osteon. All right, so they're different things. All right, next slide. All right, so there's one more category of connective tissue, and we're going to talk about that in A&P2, and that is blood. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go on and talk about covering or lining membranes. We have three types. I've already mentioned some of them. So I know I've mentioned serous membranes or serosa, but we also have mucosa or mucous membranes, or the cutaneous membrane, which you might know as skin or the integument, okay? They are always going to consist of two tissue types. One, epithelium, two, connective. Because of that, they are considered a simple organ. When you have two tissues working together, they are a simple organ, okay? Now these tend to line structures, the outside of the body, the outside of an organ, the inside of a wall, the inside of a tube, all right? That's where you're gonna be finding all of these things. Sometimes we're gonna add a third layer in of smooth muscle, but not always. All right, next layer, slide. All right, I like this picture. It's from the GI tract, so your intestines. What is cool to me is that we can see both serosa and mucosa. Now, just a preview. When you've got a mucosa, we talk about the epithelium, and then we talk about the lamina propria. And lamina propria is just the connective tissue proper in a mucosa, okay? So right here, we see the folding of the mucosa. You cannot see it clearly, but basically this would be like this, all right? And that would be the epithelium. And then right here would be the lamina propria, okay? But the magnification isn't high enough to see that in this view, okay? So that's the epithelial lining. And then the connective tissue would be right there. This connective tissue is actually considered submucosa, which is a different layer. All right, and then I've got smooth muscle here, here, and here, okay? Those are not part of the mucosa, but actually this one is part of the mucosa in this case. But anyway, out here I see my serous membrane, and you can see it's forming an anchor wall here that's going to go up to the wall of the body cavity, okay? And then it comes and it wraps around the outside of the tube, and so that would be my visceral peritoneum, and then over here would be the parietal peritoneum. All right, next slide. All right, this slide is showing you the histology of the two different parts. So up here is my serosa, down here is my mucosa. Serous membranes tend to be thin. All right, I've got my epithelial layer here. I have my connective tissue layer there, so irregular connective tissue proper, simple squamous epithelium, and then I have a layer of smooth muscle. Now, the simple squamous cells, all right, because they are a pass-through for diffusion, they can then secrete fluid, serous fluid, onto the surface. And then what I would have is another serosa over here, potentially. And that serous fluid would keep them from sticking, okay? Now with the mucosa, what I have is my basement membrane. We've talked about that, okay? This is my lamina propria, which is typically, but not always, irregular connective tissue proper, okay? And I can see my ground substance. I can see a blood vessel. I can see collagen fibers. I can see cells in here, fibroblasts there. I think that's a fibroblast. And then down here is a layer of smooth muscle, okay? Up here is my pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium in this case. And then I can see some cilia sticking out, and then I've got these adorable little goblet cells secreting mucus, which will then be moved along by the cilia. Okay, that's the basic structure of a serous membrane and a mucous membrane. And remember, because I'm always dealing with two tissue types, these are considered simple organs, just like any other organ in body. Your liver, your gallbladder, your heart, it's an organ when you've got multiple tissues working together. Next slide. All right, so we've actually already seen a lot of photomicrographs of mucosas. They are a very common thing for us to look at. Here is another example that we're looking at, and this is a part of the respiratory membrane. So this is kind of deep in your lungs because we're dealing with simple columnar epithelium. And so you can see we've got quite a few goblet cells. And then here are the simple columnar cells in here. And then I've got cilia sticking out here, and this is my lamina propria, all right? And then I've got submucosa, which is a different foundation of connective tissue down there, okay? And that was the last slide that we're gonna be looking in this section. So you can go on to the next video lecture now.